All right, everybody, got another one for you. We're going to take a look at a clip of Dennis Quaid on Jordan B. Peterson's podcast, and he's talking about what happened with movie stars. Now, I've done some videos in the past on this channel about Hollywood and about just the entertainment industry in general and how it has really declined over the last few decades, especially probably going from the maybe the 70s, but definitely the 80s and the 90s into the 2000s. I kind of like to think of the 90s as the last good decade for like movies and TV shows. That was really also probably the last decade where people really did sit down and watch TV, watch like an actual episodic um, show or go to the movie theaters, on every Friday or Saturday night, which was like routine for people to do back then. Because once the 2000s came around, cell phones had kind of already been a thing in the late 90s, but you really only had a cell phone if you were a business person and, you needed it for your business or, if your company, paid for it, gave you one. Um, in the early 2000s, people started getting their own phones. They got a lot cheaper. My generation remembers the old Nokia that had Snake on it. It was like a game you would play. It was really, the kids today would probably be like bored out of their mind seeing that. But at the time, it was like the most popular, phone on the market. Um, but once you got to like 2007, I think was the first release. If I'm not mistaken, it might have been the iPhone 1 came out in 2007 or 5, I'm not sure. But by that time, it totally changed everything. Now, you really didn't have streaming or anything like that back then, but you did already have websites that, allowed you to, watch video clips of things that people recorded with like their home, video camera or camcorder and posted on the internet. So that was already a thing. Um, I even remember there was a website years ago. It was before MySpace. It was called eBombs World, and it was like the what YouTube is today, just the really, really original first generation beta version of people uploading videos to the internet. There was other websites I think before that, but right around that time there was a bunch of them that were getting started because it was like post.com boom, and people were exploring this idea of posting videos to the internet. So that's where all this kind of came out of. And then eventually YouTube came around in like 2007. Um, but by that time, I think it really definitely changed. It already started having an impact on entertainment because don't forget, people literally just watch movies and TV shows to be entertained and to take a break from their actual lives. It's the same reason people use the internet today. The same reason that they watch YouTube or whatever is to either be entertained or to learn something they didn't know. But in the 90s, you really didn't have that because people would go on the internet, but it wasn't like it is today. And nobody was really doing any type of uploading video stuff to the internet. It was really, uh, that was kind of like black market. That was something that was like off grid. Some fringe website would maybe do that, but nobody would look at it. Um, but yeah, the 90s was probably like the last good decade for movies and TV shows. And, oddly enough, there's a lot of conservatives in Hollywood that keep their mouth shut, and they have their whole career because they just didn't want to, um, have any issues. Hollywood and the entertainment industry in general, especially film and television, is notorious for people being liberal minded. Um, and that was always kind of the way it was. Early on in the beginning, yeah, there was definitely a lot more outspoken conservatives, and people were not as afraid to, stand by their beliefs because it wasn't weird for somebody to be patriotic and love America, love their country back then. But that was like, a different time, 40s, 50s, 60s, like that era. Once you got to like the 80s and 90s, things started changing, and then especially into the 2000s, you really couldn't, profess your beliefs. But believe it or not, there's a lot of people today that are conservatives that I think they've just gotten so sick of Hollywood, or they just were not getting work. Maybe they were blacklisted because people did know their beliefs, that have kind of decided to just go their own route and uh, you know go out and make independent projects just for the love of doing what they do, and not so much about the money anymore, or the fame and the notoriety. Actually playing good characters because they enjoy playing those characters. So Dennis Quaid's one of those people. He actually did a movie just came out this year, Reagan, which oddly enough, Ronald Reagan was an actor, and he also became the president in the '80s, and he was a conservative. He actually was a conservative that won in California as the governor. And at that time, California was actually a conservative state. It was red. If you go back and look at the maps of the electoral college and the election maps from the 80s, 1980 and 1984 when he won, you could see like California at one point was a Republican state. A lot of people don't know that. They just notoriously, today it's been blue as far as people know. But if you go back and look, it has been a Republican state many times in the past. Definitely during Reagan's era and even during Nixon's era in the '70s. But even before that, so Dennis Quaid is actually one of the few actors that's he's a good actor. He's a decent actor, but he seems like a normal family man. And he's obviously did a lot of interviews this year to promote the Reagan movie. But let's take a quick look at some of the other stuff he's done if you don't really know who he is. My generation grew up watching him. So if you don't know, this is Dennis Quaid. He's an actor. His brother actually was a big actor too in the '80s, Randy Quaid, and he was really funny. He did a lot of these, like '80s slapstick. Look at some of his work. He's done some really great movies too, but he's been out of the industry for I think a long time. But Dennis, did a bunch of movies that maybe some of the people, Z might know today, like The Day After Tomorrow in 2004, although some of them might have been really young when that came out. That was a good movie, actually. One of my favorite movies that he's done was a movie called Frequency right here. Actually, Jim Caviezel was in that with him. And 2000, it was an excellent movie, but the story and the script was like really, really good. And the whole concept was like unbelievable. Nobody had really ever done anything. I mean, everybody always gets inspired by something else. So that when they create art, they're copying maybe one or multiple different, concepts from something that inspired them and then putting it into something new. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are elements of, other movies and stuff, art in that movie, but the concept itself was pretty original. And the way that they put it all together and that way that it came out in the ending was a really good movie. So if you ever have a chance to see that movie, Frequency, it's definitely one of my favorite movies that he's ever done. But you can see here he did Reagan this year, 2024, and did a great movie too, a baseball movie years ago called The Rookie. This was a awesome movie. It was like I don't know if anybody's seen, at least in the Gen Z generation, a movie from the '90s. This is another great movie that you might like if you ever have a chance to go back and look at some really good old movies. It's old now because it's like 30 years old, but in that 1993 Rookie of the Year, which is funny because it has kind of the same name, was a goofy movie about a kid who broke his arm. He was a baseball player, played Little League, wasn't really that good, broke his arm, and then, it healed, but it healed in a way where it made him be, able to pitch really fast to the point where he as a kid, got drafted to the majors. It was a really, really good movie in the '90s. People from my generation know that movie. It's funny. And that actor, I forgot his name, but he was in a bunch of stuff. I grew up watching his stuff too. Um, the movie that Dennis Quaid did, The Rookie, was kind of the same concept where, he was an older guy. He hadn't pitched in a while, but he pitched when he was younger. He was a pitcher on a baseball team, and he tried to make it into the majors, but life got in the way. And then he ended up, all of a sudden, he had so many injuries to his arm that his arm healed in a way where it made him able to pitch really fast. Um, and he just ended up pitching, really fast one day to his team that he was coaching. And they were like, you should try out, to the majors. And the whole movie was like him coaching the young kids, to become better ball players. And then the incentive was if he would try out for the majors or, like a farm team, then the team would do whatever he wanted and really try and, get to the championship. So, it was a good movie too, but it was funny because those two movies kind of, really seemed similar to each other. But the movie Dennis Quaid did, The Rookie, came out after. So it kind of copies some of that concept, except now an adult doing it. And that was a great baseball movie if you like a good baseball movie. But yeah, I feel like sometimes art gets lost throughout time. A lot of the younger generation, especially with the internet and all these videos online, people don't really go back as much and look at old movies. But there's some great movies that have been made, especially in the 80s and 90s. That was a good era for movies and TV shows, and a lot of that stuff still holds up today. But we saw some of what Dennis Quaid has done in his career over the past, 4 decades or however long he's been doing this. But let's take a look at the interview where he talks about on Jordan Peterson's show, what happened to movie stars. So let's see what he has to say.
If you don't mind. It seemed to me that Hollywood took a walloping blow with COVID and then the strike. And like one of the things I've noticed about myself is I used to go to movies all the time, to theaters. I love going to movies. And I've gone to very few movies since COVID. It's kind of like, I don't know if I got out of the habit. It's something like that. Partly, I used to know where to get reliable reviews for upcoming movies. Like I was in the stream. I knew what was coming out of Hollywood. I made plans to go see the movies.
Right.
That all disappeared. And now I don't know how to get back to that. But I think...
And you're wondering, is it because of my age?
Must be. Yeah. Well, that could be too.
Yeah.
Although, see, I don't know.
Or is it just that way?
Well, I also don't know that. And of course, the media landscape is fragmented too. And so it's hard to figure out what sources you can rely on for information.
The way they advertise movies.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the younger kids today, they really don't know what it was like growing up back in the 80s and 90s where, you would go to a movie theater. First of all, the movie would cost like somewhere between $2.50 to $5 for a ticket. And we didn't have like crazy IMAX and all that stuff. We just had, a typical movie with a screen. And like the movie theaters were filled. I mean, packed, especially on like a Friday or a Saturday night. If you were younger, where you weren't old enough to go out to like, a bar or a club or something, but you wanted to go out on a Friday night, you would mostly always go to a movie theater or something like that. And they were always packed. I mean, there were so many times where, we would go to movies and you get there a little late. You got to stand in the back because there's no more seats. I went to a movie during COVID. So obviously, things were shut down. This movie theater was a brand new movie theater. It was just built maybe a couple of years before. Not only was the theater empty, the entire movie theater, the whole building was empty. It was actually 2 floors too. Both floors had no one on it except the people who worked there. There was literally people vacuuming like the floor, the cleaning people, because there was no one walking. It was literally a Friday night, I think at like 9 o'clock. And, on a Friday night, that was like a pretty peak time back in the day. And they were vacuuming the floor in the middle of the lobby because no one was walking in. No one was there. It looked like they were literally closing down. They were getting ready to shut down. But it was 9 o'clock on a Friday. And they were open for a few more hours because they had more movies playing. But the whole theater was empty. We literally sat in the middle. Like, not one seat around us. Anywhere in the whole theater had another person in it. It was like we had that movie for ourselves. It was like we had a home theater in our home, in our mansion or something. It was actually pretty interesting. But I was just like, wow, this is so, interesting because I had never seen, and at the time, I don't think I had been to a movie in a theater for a few years. So I was kind of out of touch anyway. But when I saw that, I was like, and everything was brand new. They had all new, it was like one of those movie theaters where you could get food, delivered to your seat or whatever. And it was definitely like, more of a trendy movie theater, not the movie theaters I grew up with where you just had like popcorn, soda, and candy. I had like a little mini restaurant or something in it where they would bring you food. And, all state-of-the-art stuff. The seats reclined. They had like, I think, I'm not even kidding, I think it might have had, maybe not massagers, but they had like that lumbar support button where you could push it and they would move your back up. I mean, it was really like a nice theater. And everything was brand new. Nothing was dirty or sticky or gross. And I could not believe how on a Friday night at 9 o'clock, nobody was in the building. I was like, how are these people going to stay in business? So it's a different world today. The younger generation really doesn't know what it was like back then. And, how things have really changed today. I guess people just stay home and, watch Netflix or stream stuff. But there is something to going and seeing a movie in a theater with a huge screen, 100-inch, 200-inch, whatever it is, screen, and getting to experience a movie, in that way. But yeah, it's changed a lot, nowadays. So let's continue.
This is nowhere near what it used to be.
Yeah,
It used to be
right.
just like an ad in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And
And that
you
was
know,
enough.
yeah, and then it became like TV ads, and audiences could smell a movie.
Yeah, right.
It was like so surprising. It was just like, I remember for me personally, Breaking Away, when that came out, it was hard. There's no advertising or anything like that. And we were driving to the theater, to go you go for the, like the opening of it, on that Friday.
Yeah.
And there's a line around the
Yeah,
block.
yeah, yeah.
It's like,
Well, people are in the movie.
how do they
culture.
know?
Well, that's the thing, is that these things are very fragile, is that we never know what makes a whole enterprise work. And if people are movie fans,
That's another thing too that's you know crazy to think back about, because sometimes you forget things over time. You forget like what you used to do because you that's just not the way you do it anymore. When I was younger, we used to look up movie times in the newspaper. That's how you'd find out what movie was playing at what theater. And they would pretty much only give you the theaters that were in your local area. It wasn't like you can go on, Google today and look up 100 movie theaters in the 50-mile radius around you. You literally had like 5 movie theaters in your area, and they would just be printed in the newspaper as to what movie and what showtime and what theater it was playing at. And that's how you would find out. It wasn't until later on, this is also nostalgic too today, but in the, I think, early 2000s, you used to be able to call this like hotline called Movie Phone. And it was an automated voice, kind of like what AI is today, except it was a real guy that recorded it. And he would literally read off every single movie and showtime and what theater it was playing at. So if you wanted to see a movie that you wanted to, know if it was playing, you would have to wait through like a list of movies and their showtimes before they got to yours. It was such It's so crazy, and to think about like how antiquated things were back then, but that was the technology and what we had at that time. Today it's like crazy. You just go on, you don't even have to go on the movie theater's website. You could just go on Google Maps and hit the, movie theater, and there's like a drop down menu. Will show you all the theaters and the showtimes right there on that page. It's so different today. But that was just another interesting thing about, back then, the way we did things.
they're in the movie culture. They track it. And if you break that, it's like,
that's gone.
yeah, well, yes. Okay. So you feel that that's gone.
You don't see Roger Ebert on television anymore. There was a
Yeah.
whole culture that went with it
Yeah,
that
yeah.
everybody watched. Well,
Man, it's all coming back. Yeah. Also, another thing was too, um, they didn't have like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that back then for movie ratings. But most of the time, people don't even care about that anymore. They just watch the trailer, see if it's something that they want to see. Um, based off of that alone. We used to look at what the movie critics would say about a movie and how they would rate it. And there was a notable one, Ebert and Roper, uh, were these like big movie critics that were really had a great reputation. It was like kind of like a food critic, but for movies, where they would rate the movie and tell you a little bit about like what it was about, and how they thought that was it worth seeing. And so people would kind of get an idea. Oh, is this movie? So it was like almost like you know, I don't know, this weird thing. How like how restaurants have critics come in to judge them on their cooking, and they wine and dine them because they want to get a good rating. It was like that back then too. These people would give the movie a rating, and it could make or break a film. It could literally kill that movie's box office sales just based on their assessment of that movie. So that was another crazy thing back then. You would tune into people like that, critics, to see what they had to say about the movie, to see if you even wanted to go see the movie.
the new movies coming up, and uh, laying them out there, what they're about,
Yeah.
and all that. And,
Yeah. And you knew months in advance.
really, great debates on what they were about.
Yeah.
And
So how do you view the current reality and the potential future of the film industry? Are there still stars?
That's the thing. Who was the last movie star?
Well, from what I've been able to understand, the only star truly standing,
Leonardo DiCaprio,
Cruise?
or it's no, Cruise. That's going too far back. Leo. I mean,
Yeah.
the last movies, they're still out there.
Yeah,
they do occur.
Yeah, they're out there, but they also, my sense too is that, and I don't really know what to make of this, that are they the last of a dying breed?
Well, the new is like it's gone to social media.
Yeah.
That's where the movie stars are. I mean, Justin Bieber, first star, totally created on YouTube.
Yeah.
Not nowhere near the traditional way.
Yeah.
Of doing it. And then the actors now are the same way. They have their Instagram page. They self-advertising.
Yeah.
And but it used to be back then, movie stars, like going up and really until the 80s, 90s, true movie star, you wouldn't do a talk show on TV. You would avoid TV like the plague.
Right.
Jack Nicholson, you would never see him on a talk show. He'd do one interview in a prestigious magazine, whether it be Time, Playboy,
right,
whatever it was.
Right.
That's
part of that protection of exclusivity.
Yeah. And you would, some guy would spend a couple of days with him or something.
I love how he says prestigious magazine and then he throws Playboy in there. I mean, that was, at the time, yeah, that was, a very popular magazine and people would do interviews in there. But the irony is funny because it was just a bunch of naked women. But at the time, they did do a lot of, well-known celebrity interviews.
He wouldn't, there was a mystery to him.
Yeah.
So that when you went to the theater, really what makes a movie star is you go to the theater, they are a mystery. You don't know too much really about their life.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to
imprint
either.
your own life on them.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
You see them for something inside you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a movie star.
Well, you actually don't want to know much about the personal life of an actor.
And now it's like, well, it got to be that you just do everything.
Yeah.
That's a great point that he made about how, back then, movie stars would really be very elusive. They would be like enigmas. Every once in a while, they would show up on some red carpet for a big award ceremony or do an interview, some big interview, maybe once or twice a year. And it really did add to their celebrity. It added to, basically making them idols, which is what we had. We had like a generation of people who, back in the day, you always had stars. You always had celebrities that were stars. But back in like the 60s and 70s, a celebrity would be, somebody famous, but they would live in your neighborhood or your neighborhood adjacent, where you could kind of see them walking on the street. You could see them out in the world. You might bump into them in a restaurant. And they were a lot more down to earth than in like the 80s and 90s. Once you got to like the 90s and the 2000s, especially, they almost had like a godlike complex about them. I mean, they were making much more money, multimillionaires. They'd buy these mansions, gated, you can't get in to keep everybody out. And it was like they were untouchable. And I think that, and again, if they were really not, out there as much except through their art, I think that it definitely created a generation of people that worship these people like idols. And now that all this crazy stuff is coming out, like the P. Diddy stuff, the Epstein stuff, and then just a lot of these, quote unquote celebrities, being more prevalent and more, present in social media and out there to the public, even like, apps like Cameo will let you pay them to say a little something to you personally or somebody it kind of broke down that wall. But I think with it, a lot of people ended up um, getting like crushed because they built this person up in their mind as like this almost like a godlike person. And then when the humanity of them set in, um, people just lost it. That's why I think we're at this point now where people are almost begging for the Epstein list to come out and the P. Diddy stuff to come out so that they can finally like point fingers and say, I knew, that person that was my hero, was actually a bad person or a creep. Now I can finally, break that, let go of that idol worship. Um, or just to be, shocked to see if that person that you've, worshipped your whole life is even involved in that stuff. I think there's a lot of people that are just kind of waiting for that to just give them closure. Because I think a lot of people, like I said, really built these celebrities up to be, you know, um, idols, like gods in their lives, and they worship them. Um, and a lot of that had to do with how elusive they were, how much they weren't on. Many things are out there to the public aside from the art that they would put out. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think it's nice to see that we're finally living in a time where um, things are a lot more down to earth, and the people that are getting famous nowadays, yeah, there's a lot of people on social media that are famous and they're acting the exact same way as the celebrities that did movies and TV shows back in the day did. But there's also a lot of people who are, famous and well known through social media and through different online mediums, and they are a lot more normal and regular everyday people than the way that these Hollywood people were for so long. So there definitely was a shift that happened somewhere along the lines where Hollywood was like an echo chamber, and you were either in that club or you were on the outside, and everybody from the outside would be like looking in through glass. Um, but now it's a little different. There's people who are on social media that are on podcasts, and they're all over the country and all over the world. So they're a lot more integrated into normal society, which is the way it should be. We shouldn't have like these godlike people and then isolate them to one location of the country, and that's like their kingdom. It's weird. Um, it's funny how it went full circle. Now the people that are famous are back to living in the local communities where everybody else lives all throughout the country, not isolated to one town in one state, and everybody knows like that's something else. Hollywood is like its own country in America. So yeah, just interesting to see the things go full circle, I guess.
Yeah.
About everybody.
Yeah.
And
that brings them down to earth, and that's not good if you're a star.
Well, it doesn't create mystery.
Yeah, right.
Put it that way.
I wonder too how much of it is the fact that, like, when you and I grew up, being on television was like, that was a remarkable and unlikely occurrence, to be personally on television, even to know someone who was on television. The bandwidth was so narrow.
Yeah.
And then the movies were above that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It was easier to be on TV than on the movies.
Right.
But now everyone is on TV all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's another borderline between the public and the actor that's disappeared. It's like everybody is videoed from the time they're young.
But there's no going back. I mean, that's the way the world heads. And good things come out of it. Good things.
What do you see that's good coming out of it?
Well, for one thing, there's really a broad communication in the zeitgeist. People have taken over their own stories.
Yeah.
And like, you could be like me and choose not to participate very much. I mean, I have an Instagram page, I have a Facebook page, and I didn't grow up with it. So it seems like a real chore to me.
Yeah.
And,
right. It's not your culture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I like face-to-face communication, and I like this.
Why?
This is great.
Why? Why do you like
this? It's a real. I feel like I'm. That is one good thing about today, as opposed to then, is that you could do an interview like with a magazine, and somebody who was out to do a job on you, because they kind of feel like they build you up.
Yeah.
You have this fall, and then you have the comeback.
Yeah.
The thing, but like with this, it's unfettered.
Yeah.
And I get to represent myself.
Yeah. Well,
in my way.
YouTube's great for that, and podcasts are great for that. And they really reward unfettered communication. Like the people I've talked to, anybody I've talked to on my YouTube channel who politics or is false, they get slaughtered.
Yeah.
Like if they say
it comes out very quickly. You find out who people are.
Yeah.
You can't hide so much.
Yeah. Well, that's what Joe Rogan told me. He said, you can tell if there's anything to anyone after about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you can, people who are hollow, they're exhausted, especially in a podcast like Rogan's, which is 3 hours long. It's like there better be some depth to you to get through that conversation in an interesting manner for 3 bloody hours.
The other kind of like, let's see what happens like 30 years from now. But, some of this stuff is going to come back to haunt people. I mean, some of the things that I did and thought or whatever, back in my teens, 20s, man, I'm so glad it's not on YouTube.
That's for sure, man. I feel exactly the same way. I can't imagine, I remember most of my adolescence and my adolescent friends as really a non-stop parade of stupid decisions.
Yeah, you should be able to make those stupid decisions in private.
Right, that's for sure, man. The last thing I would have wanted was video records of that, right? Yeah. And for it to be distributed around the school. Yeah. I can't imagine, like it was a difficult enough enterprise trying to negotiate the weird social world of adolescence without having to be absolutely terrified that some goddamn stupid thing you did was going to be permanently instantiated in the minds of everyone in your town. God, I just can't imagine what that would be like. Terrible.
Yeah, and you just can't just move away from it because it's internet.
Well, that's right. That's right. It follows you. Well, that's right. Well, one of the wonderful things about human memory is that we forget.
Yeah.
Right. The remembering, that's not exactly a miracle. Like things happened, and so now you know it. It's like, well, can you forget? Can you put it behind you? Well, not if it's permanently recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not good.
So that's such a good final point that he made is we're living through a social experiment right now. And I don't think a lot of people see it that way. We haven't gone through it takes about 10 years to kind of really master something, but then it takes about 20 years to learn from it. Learn from everything that you thought you knew about that thing and see how it actually was implemented, applied to the world, to real life, and then go back, see how it all worked out, how it all unfolded. Was it actually what we thought it was? And that's such a good point that he made about how we're recording everyone's mistakes as well, right? People are putting out, like I'm putting out this podcast now, and I'm going to probably say things on here that are eventually going to turn out to be not true because we had the information wrong at this time. And so it'll make me in this moment incorrect. But I don't know that now. My future self will learn that by looking back on this. So it's really quite interesting that we have no choice but to live through this social experiment because hindsight's 2020. You can't know until you get to the future. But the unfortunate thing is that's true. I did a lot of dumb things growing up. I wouldn't want all, if not any of that, recorded to be out there forever, but not even just to be out there, for me to have to relive, because you can forget things, right? When you let go of things, you move on, right? Things become a distant memory, and until you actually think hard about it again, it's not on your mind. But if it's captioned on video, you could keep reliving it over and over again in every present moment, every present time that you're living. So you're almost brought back to that place and that time and that mindset that you were in at that time, which is not yours anymore. So it could be a good thing and a bad thing. I guess we're really going to see. Time will tell exactly how all this plays out. But you're going to see a lot of people that are going to do, you're almost going to see like an evolution of people. You're going to see people who are, like a podcaster, for example, you're going to see them grow as a person right on camera throughout time. You're going to see them, um, learn things each day in those moments and then apply them in the future. And you're going to look back at who they were and who they are in that present time. And you're going to see like their growth, you know, and it's all going to be on camera. It's all going to be recorded. Um, so, it's really a social experiment when you think about it. It's, and a lot of people are going to look back at some of their old stuff and say, wow, I can't believe I thought that way. Or, oh man, I look, you know, I'm totally a different person today. I don't even recognize that person. So yeah, it's a really interesting social experiment. We're going to see how it plays out over the next few decades because we're just kind of, you know, what is it, 15 years now that we're into YouTube and people recording stuff, putting it online. And, we're gonna get to see probably, people who go viral or podcasters or whatever who make content are probably going to be looking back on some of that stuff and learning from it, hopefully, but looking back on it, thinking, I can't believe that's the way not only that I thought then, but that we all thought at that time, and how much things have changed since then. So like I said, it's going to be an interesting social experiment when it finally all does unfold, and we're going to get to see what that looks like in the future. But that's a great point that we're kind of time capsuling all this stuff for the future, for our future selves. Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of part of the reason why I'm doing this is to give my children something to be able to look at as a time capsule of their father and the things that he wanted to, convey to them. Not everything is a life lesson, especially when you're doing like review videos or reaction videos, but yeah, there's definitely going to be some, little nuggets of truth and wisdom that hopefully they can take from some of this content. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But it was a good video. I liked to see what Dennis Quaid had to say, and it's true. The whole industry has changed. You really don't have celebrities like that anymore. You do have people who, well, like for example, you have people who are they get way more viewers today than the people who were famous back then did. But the people who were famous back then, they are they were famous on another level. Like just take somebody hypothetically like Mr. Beast. I think he has over 1 billion subscribers on his maybe just YouTube channel alone. But it could be collectively with all his different platforms. That means 1 billion, unless they're bots, 1 billion people throughout the world. There's about 7 or 8 billion now. 1 billion have heard of this person, enough to at least click the button subscribe on his channel. But he is not even remotely close to being as famous as the Beatles were. And the Beatles didn't have access to 8 billion people back then because 8 billion people were not the world's population back then. It was smaller in the 60s. So, you know, they probably, maybe like 500 million people knew them, at that time, not now. Now, obviously, people know them because of their work from the past, but at the time, maybe only 500 million people knew them, but they were way more famous to those 500 million people than somebody like that today, even though that person has more viewers, technically, a bigger audience. So yeah, the celebrity has changed. It's not the same anymore. And that's a good thing because it kind of keeps people humbled. In the Bible it says God will exalt those who humble themselves, and He will humble those who exalt themselves. So, keeping people in like a state of being down to earth is a lot better for them to not develop like a God complex, and then their followers to end up, worshiping them like false idols. Yeah, interesting video. Let me know in the comments what you thought about it. And if you have any, movie recommendations for either him or other actors or movies that you like, definitely put that in the comments for everybody to see. Like to, definitely share that with everybody here so we can all, check out some cool stuff and give recommendations and stuff like that. But yeah, like, subscribe, follow, share all that good stuff because it keeps the channel growing. And let me know what type of content you want me to make, any type of videos you want me to react to or take a look at. But that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one. All right, everybody, I just want to take a moment to promote my children's book. This is Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back. And this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. It's a children's book. I actually wrote this for my son, and it's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, bookshop.org, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly to me, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores throughout the country. You can find out which ones are closest to you on my Instagram page. You know, we highly recommend that you shop local, buy from a local bookstore. So if you are looking to, you know, get a children's book for you or anybody you know, or even with the holidays coming up, it's a great time to, you know, buy a children's book as a gift. You know, definitely get it from a bookstore that's local to you. But if you absolutely can't get it from one of the bookstores that are currently carrying it right now, and we're in about 15 or 16 different states across the country, so it may actually be in your state, and it could even be local to you. But if you can't get it from the physical bookstore, check out our Amazon storefront. The book's available on there right now. And like I said, with the holidays coming up, you may want to do your Christmas or Hanukkah or holiday shopping early, and you can even order it from our Amazon storefront and ship it directly to whoever you're gifting it to. But it's available on those platforms, Amazon storefront and bookstores and other websites that I mentioned. But I want to take a moment here to look at the storefront just to give you an idea of some other stuff that we have available on there. These are products that we highly recommend. They are things that we use in our daily lives, and it's all organized by category. So it's a lot easier to, you know, shop for the holidays and specifically for things that interest you, particular categories. Available right now, many different items on our storefront. If you can see here, 61 items just in women's apparel, fall decor, because right now we're in fall, 26 items, kitchen items, you know, baking specifically, things for around the house, children's toys, even stuff for parties. If you're trying to save money on a party and throw in your own, you know, occasion, you can even buy some cool gadgets here to help you, you know, put on a better party. You know, health and wellness items here, even stuff for Christmas. And there's the book right there. So you can get it from the storefront. You can get it from the bookstores, like I mentioned. But it's available on all these different platforms. It's really easy to find and gift to somebody. Also, I want to show you the apparel shop, and these are some clothing items that we actually produced. So if you're looking to get some cool apparel items, you know, shirts, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, leggings, even accessories, cell phone cases, women's makeup bags, fanny packs, coffee mugs, all different types of stuff, even some, you know, art, all different categories here, apparel, homeware, accessories, drinks, even digital items. It's all on this store, healthybodygoodssoul.com. Anything that pertains to you or somebody that you're looking to get a gift for the holidays. A lot of great designs on here, a lot of cool designs that we actually custom created. Stainless steel water bottles, especially now with the fall and winter. A lot of cool hoodies and long sleeve shirts. This is a really cool one, I think, for women. The original Be Your Soul apparel, that one's actually really popular. People tend to like that. This one's one of my favorites. The free shirt. It's the American flag, and it says free, and that says not property of the United States government. That one's pretty cool. Got all different types of tank tops, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, tote bags, coffee mugs, even some items for kids, backpacks. So if you're the type that likes to, you know, plan ahead, I would definitely recommend ordering from the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop. within the next couple of weeks to get everything in time for the holidays. Use code SAVE15 on the apparel shop to save 15% off everything on the storefront. So order within the next week or two, and you'll definitely have everything in time for the holidays. Definitely check out all the links to everything, the Amazon storefront, the book, and the apparel shop in my bio on all my platforms: Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. But you can also find them in all the show notes for every episode that I post, and get all your orders in time for the holidays. All right, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the channel continue to grow. And put in the comments things that you would like me to talk about and make videos on for the future, and I will definitely do my best to do that. Stay tuned for the next one.